in Nairobi. Welcome to the last of two editions of the Presidential Debate 2017. My name is Linus Kaikai of NTV.
And my name is Joe Ageo of KTN News. This debate has been organized by Debates Media Limited, a broad partnership of mainstream media houses comprising television, radio, newspapers, and online platforms.
The format, rules, and guidelines of this debate have been developed by the Debates Media Limited in keeping with the best international practice and have also been aligned with the context of Kenya and Kenyans.
Now, these rules have been shared with all the 8 presidential campaign teams, and the rules prescribe that only presidential candidates duly nominated by their parties and cleared by the IEBC can take part in tonight's debate.
And as your moderators tonight, we shall be guiding discussions between the presidential candidates on selected topics that have also, as per regulations, been shared with the respective campaign teams. The questions are, however, our own and have not been shared with anyone.
Now, this debate is taking place in front of a selected audience that includes ordinary Kenyan voters. The audience will quietly follow the debate, no jeering or cheering, no clapping or any form of applause, except from a moment from now, as we welcome the candidates on stage.
As prescribed by the format, the candidates for the debate must have attained 5% and above of the popularity ratings in any recognized recent opinion polls. And the only candidates placed by Ipsos and Infotrack above this threshold are President Uhuru Kenyatta of the Jubilee Party and Honorable Raila Odinga of the NASA coalition.
Now, both candidates had been duly invited for the debate, but at this hour, we only have present here NASA coalition's candidate, Honorable Raila Odinga, whom we now welcome on stage.
Let us now put our hands together for Honorable Raila Odinga.
Thank you very much, Honorable Raila Odinga. Now, as we mentioned, we had duly invited the President, who is also the Jubilee presidential candidate for this year, and the half-hour wait was to try and give him ample time to get here if he was on his way. But as it is now, we shall begin the debate, and we'll start with my colleague, Linus Kaikai.
Thank you, Honorable Raila Odinga, for turning up for the debate. You need no introduction, so we are going straight to the issues of this debate. Yesterday, opinion pollsters, specifically Ipsos and Infotrack, released their findings. And one of the findings down there was that a majority of Kenyans, according to Ipsos, 61% of Kenyans feel the country is headed in the wrong direction. Only 27%, according to Ipsos, of Kenyans think the country is headed in the right direction. Where do you belong, Mr. Odinga, 61% or 27%?
Joe, thank you very much. Allow me first to greet Kenyans. I know that very many Kenyans wanatazama mjadala wa siku huu kwenye runinga. Nataka kuchukua fursa kuwasalimu na vile vile kuambia ya kwamba tumekuja hapa kama Wakenya kujadiliana juu ya shida ambayo mnakumba Wakenya wote kwa jumla, na sio tu kuja kwa mambo ya upinzani, lakini kutafuta suluhu kwa yale shida ambayo inakumba sisi kama Wakenya yote. Karibuni na asanteni sana. Having said that, let me now come back to the opinion poll, Ipsos and Sinovate. Joe, don't just believe that it is the polls that we should be talking about. We're talking about the Kenyans themselves, how they feel. And I have traveled around this country over the last 1 month in the campaign, and Kenyans are hurting. Majority of Kenyans are hurting seriously. The cost of living has gone up very seriously. From the last time, from 2013 up to now where we are, the inflation rate has gone up by 40% cumulatively. That is the cost of living 40%. But the average wage has only increased by 12%. And this is being felt by the people. Wherever you go, you are told about Unga. Unga, and that's why we called it the Unga Revolution. You know that the price of the maize meal was 110. It is now 150, 180, sometimes 200. The price of sugar is nearly 200 per 2 kilogram. The price of milk, which used to be 36 shillings, is now 60 shillings. But they buy it from farmers at 35 shillings. So generally, the Kenyans are justified in feeling that the country is heading in the wrong direction. And the issue is unemployment, and that issue is corruption, which is actually hurting our economy. The runaway corruption, what you call mega corruption, the Jubilee government. This really is, in my view, the cause of dissatisfaction by the people of Kenya.
And Honorable Odinga, you're running for president for the 4th time, if I'm not wrong. And for the 4th time, you're running for the presidency of this country against the backdrop of very sad statistics, if Ipsos and Infotrack findings are to be believed, especially about the cost of living, corruption, and unemployment. What is your answers to these things, and why do you see yourself as the answer to these questions?
Yes, Joe, this is my 4th time running, correct? And as you know, that I lost once in those other previous 3 elections. But I am running here because of my commitment to change this country. I represent change. The coalition that has chosen me as their candidate, the National Super Alliance Coalition, is a coalition that wants to bring change to our country. We think that we have a solution to the problems. For example, I mentioned the issue of mismanagement of our economy. That's the reason why we have got runaway inflation in the country. This government has borrowed, and they've borrowed very expensively. They've run away from the concessional loans and have gone for commercial loans with actually no maturity rate. And then borrowed and not invested properly, so that most of that money has not been invested in what you can say job-creating opportunities in the country. That's why the unemployment right now stands at 40%. We have nearly 12 million youths who are on the streets looking for jobs. We believe that we can find a solution to that problem. We believe also that we can deal with the issues of inclusivity in our society from the ethnic point of view, from the gender point of view. We also believe that we can be able to turn things around economically, can create fiscal discipline so that we can be able to raise sufficient revenue and invest that revenue also properly. At the moment, every shilling that is spent, another shilling is stolen, ends in the private pockets of the people. We are going to deal with the issue of corruption also as a coalition.
Mr. Odinga, I would like to hear more specifics on your plans, and starting with the question of the cost of living. Some of the proposals you have put there have been dismissed as unrealistic in a free market economy like Kenya. You've spoken of reducing rent. You've spoken of reducing the cost of housing. How do you plan to do that? And again, in a free market economy like Kenya?
Yes, it is a free market economy. But they have said that the other coalition, or you may call it those who are in government, are pro-business and we have been described as being pro-market. The difference is basically that those people are more focused on just one small portion of our economy. Because what we call the formal sector in our economy only employs 2.5 million people, whereas the informal sector employs 13 million people. We are going to focus our attention to where most people live and work, but at the same time not neglecting the other sector as well. But most importantly, you have asked a specific question about issues like rents and so on. Our country is fast urbanizing. The rural-urban migration is increasing by the day or by the month and by the year. We are going to reach a stage where nearly 60–70% of our population are going to be living in urban areas. But this issue of low-cost housing has not been sufficiently addressed. And that is the reason why we have problems we're having today. You see, at independence, when urbanization started, the regime at that time came up with the policy of go back to the land, telling people to go back to the land. And even they coined a song saying, Mzee Kasema.
Sorry for interrupting you, Honorable Odinga. I've listened to you very carefully, and I'm sure tenants out there are listening to you very carefully. The question again, how do you plan to reduce the cost of rent as you have promised in your campaigns?
Joe, there is a law here which is called Rent Restrictions Act. That act is meant to deal with the low-cost housing, where the poor people live, like even the informal shelters, like you have them in Kibera, in Mathare, in Kwanjenga, and so on and so forth. This law has been meant to protect the poor from overexploitation of the landlords or the structure owners. It has not been properly enforced. So that you find the landlords are increasing rents by the day, and if you default in payment within 1 week, you find your door removed, the roof has been removed by the landlord, you find your wife and children sitting outside the cold. We are going to enforce the Rent Restriction Act to protect the poor, to ensure that they're not forced to pay rent which they cannot afford, so that they live in squalor.
Landlords, you are, Honorable Odinga, landlords are voters, and they are listening to you right now. How do you think they feel about what you're saying?
It is a conversation I have had for a long time with the landlords. In fact, they're not landlords. In the slum, they're called the structure owners, because the land does not belong to them. The term landlord means that you've got a land over which you're loading. Now, these are basically structure owners who are given a temporary occupation license by the government, TOL, to put up a structure so that they can be able to rent it out. But the land belongs to the government. They are listening to me. I'm not saying that they should not be allowed to also make business, but what you call live and let live. Let them make the money, but let also the poor not be so much exploited so that they're not able to put bread on the table.
Right, we're discussing leadership and integrity as our first topic tonight, and we've brought the issue of the direction of the country. I now want to take you to the regional side of things. And how do you think Kenya's standing around the region and Africa has been in the past few years, considering that just not long ago, the coalition of the willing that had gotten together to do the Northern Corridor projects, that's Kenya, Rwanda, and Uganda. Rwanda has changed its mind. They don't want the project anymore, and they prefer to construct it through Tanzania. How do we stand regionally, in your opinion?
I think, Joe, the idea of a federation of East Africa was at the heart of the founding fathers of this region. That was informed the formation of the first community. It died, but not because of lack of commitment, but because of greed by some leaders. I do believe that this region will benefit more if we can remove some barriers which still exist and open the borders for free flow of goods and people. It can be done if there is political will to do so. I mean, the Northern Corridor is just one of the corridors. If you really want to integrate this region, you don't have to just have Northern Corridor. You need the Central Corridor, you need the Southern Corridor as well, and then integrate them.
But so, the question is, Kenya has been abandoned in the Northern Corridors project by both Uganda and Rwanda. What does that say about Kenya?
It speaks volumes about the leadership of Kenya. I think it is the leadership that is isolating itself. And that's the reason why Uganda is finding it more attractive to go to Tanzania. Tanga or Dar es Salaam is much farther away from Kampala than Nairobi and Mombasa. It does not make any sense economically, other than that it was a political decision. So I think that we need to do some soul searching and thinking. I think it is the leadership that has let Kenya down.
4 Kenyans are currently languishing in jail in South Sudan. They were arrested and jailed for life for allegedly trying to defraud the Southern Sudanese government of some 200 million US dollars. Are you aware of this case? And if you were president, what would you do about that case?
I am aware that some Kenyans were arrested in Southern Sudan for suspected crime. I discussed this matter with the leadership of South Sudan. At that time, my appeal was to ensure that justice was done, that proper investigations were carried out, and that they were given fair trial before conviction. I do not believe that that has been the case as of now. We would really plead that those Kenyans are given a fair trial by international standards, so that those who are found to be culpable or guilty then face the law. In my view, that would be my plea to the government of South Sudan. And I do feel that the Kenya government has got sufficient political leverage to ensure that this is done to those Kenyans.
I think the relatives of these 4 Kenyans would want to hear specifics on what you would do if you won the election on the 8th of August. Would you move to have them freed? Because the trial, unfair as it was, if you're describing it as such, is already over and they've been jailed for life.
Yes, what I'm saying actually amounts to appealing on their behalf. Because I'm saying that I'm not convinced that they have had a fair trial. Maybe by Southern Sudanese standard, but I say by international standards. I do not think that that was a fair trial. And therefore, I would ask the government to ensure that they get fair trial.
I want to stick still to the regional issues and bring up the very interesting issue about a tallying center in Tanzania. Is that true?
Are you through or you are still
I'm through.
I thought you were continuing the question.
No, you had the question, Honorable Odinga.
No, Joe, certain things exist in people's imagination. They have accused Tanzania government of hosting a tallying center for us. Why do we even need to have a tallying center in Tanzania? We are going through an electoral process. And the law does not prohibit anybody from tallying the results. The Constitution is very clear, and even the ruling of the courts are now very clear, that the results as announced by the presiding officer at the polling station cannot be altered by a returning officer at the constituency level, tallying. Then the tallying results at the constituency level announced by the returning officer are also final, and they cannot be altered by the commission sitting here in Nairobi. That is the law as it stands right now.
And Honorable Odinga will come to those details when we discuss
but I'm going
the
to the
credibility
issue
of
the tallying center.
Yes, tallying center. Please address yourself to the question of
So
tallying center in Tanzania.
we have made it very clear that we are going to be tallying so that we can be able to compare our result with those of the IBC. So why should somebody be worried about a tallying center, even if it is in Germany, even if it is in the United States, or if it is in the moon? Why should that be an issue? Why should that be a security issue? Because we are just adding up results and storing it. Whatever we are storing it, unless somebody intends to rig. Why should that be a matter of national importance to the security intelligence of this country?
So do you or not have a tallying center in Tanzania?
We have a tallying center.
In Tanzania?
In Kenya, and in Kenya, and in the clouds.
Well, Honorable Odinga, let's come to the issue of elections. And you've been accused by your opponents of crying wolf. Every election, you've run for the fourth time now, and almost every election, you always raise questions about the credibility of that election way before it is held. You have, for example, made very serious allegations this year that the election is about to be rigged using, among others, the military. Is that something you would repeat? Is that a statement you would repeat in this debate?
Joe, I've not been crying wolf. Kenyans know the truth. You know what happens in 2007? That when we were leading by over 1 million votes, and the total number of votes which were left could not even close that gap, they shut the media, stopped the media from live transmission, and then went on to rig the result. Everybody knows that. Even Mr. Kriegler came and has his report. Even Mr. Kivit himself, when he was asked, he said he did not know who won the elections. That's the chairman of the Electoral Commission. Last time, the results are also now out. That 12 million people voted for the president, but only 10 million people voted in the other 5 elections. Meaning that there were 2 million Kenyans who went to the booth and only voted for the president, did not vote for anybody else. Nobody can believe that. So now, we have said that they are at it again, because they have sensed defeat. The figures are not adding up. And that's the reason why they are involving the security forces. And I've said that the Kenyan military has such a reputation internationally. And we have respect for the Kenyan military. I used to co-chair the Security Council. And I've said that they should desist the temptation to be engaged or involved in manipulating of the electoral results. The National Intelligence Service in this country must desist from interfering with the electoral process. Until and unless that happens, we will always be having problems here. They're the ones who are now involved in recruiting returning officers, recruiting presiding officers, recruiting clerks, police officers, and we even showed correspondence showing that serving police officers have been asked to surrender their forces' ID cards to be engaged in so-called special duties. What are the special duties? You need to know that I was a prime minister. I used to co-chair the National Security Council. I have information. When I'm talking from authority, and nobody can contradict me. When I said the other time, even the Minister for Defense came out and confirmed that indeed there was a training taking place at the Embakasi barracks at that time. And they say that they were preparing themselves to provide security during the elections. It is not the responsibility of the military to provide security internally. That's the work of the police force. Under our constitution, The security force, the military is only supposed to protect us against external aggression. And they cannot be deployed without express approval by Parliament. Parliament has been closed, and there's been no permission given to President Uhuru Kenyatta to deploy the military.
Before I go to my next question, Honorable Odinga, I do understand that the lighting here tonight is quite bright. And this is actually Linus Kaikai. We should have explained our sitting positions. And to my left is Joe Ageo. And with a bit of makeup, we actually look alike. So thank you very much. I'll continue with my question. With regard to what some of your critics, Honorable Odinga, see as your persistent war on institutions. You fight institutions, that's what they say. You wanted the other IEBC out, they were removed. You have a new IEBC, you still have a problem with that IEBC. You've explained your position on what you're talking about with regard to the role of the military in the election. You are known to have spoken very strongly against the institutions like the provincial administration or former provincial administration. Are you a man on the war path against institutions? And given a chance, what would you and how would you relate with these same institutions if you became president?
Joe, I'm not fighting institutions.
This is Kaikai. This is Linus.
Sorry. I'm sorry. This is Linus. You said you look alike. So I'm justified in confusing your identities.
Absolutely. Go ahead.
Whenever you see me criticize an institution, I'm not doing what you call negative criticism. I'm doing what you call constructive criticism with a view to trying to make those institutions change. You know, we have a new constitution. If we had not been fighting the institutions, we would never been having we would not be having a new constitution today, because everybody else wanted the status quo to remain. Remember the talk at that time that KANU will rule for the next 100 years. The country was not cohesive enough for multipartyism and so on. So we all the times want to bring improvements. You have a new constitution. Now this new constitution needs to be implemented. Unfortunately, the responsibility of implementing this new constitution fell into the hands of those who opposed it. Remember the red cadres and the watermelons, and they're the ones who are in charge. So they are actually undermining the new constitution. They are undermining some of these institutions, like the Electoral Commission. The Electoral Commission should be an independent body that exists and works independently without interference from the executive. But if you see Mr. Matiang'i coming out and telling the political parties that, oh, no, only one person is going to be allowed at the polling station as an agent, people are not going to be allowed, they will vote and leave, so on. You ask yourself...
In all fairness, Mr. Odinga, your grievances against IEBC are older than Matiang'i's term as acting CS in charge of security.
Yes, the first time we actually approached the IEBC and we asked them to bring about certain changes which we know brought some challenges in the last elections. And the former IEBC, led by Mr. Isaac Hassan, refused to listen to us. Our petitions to them fell on deaf ears. We therefore had no other alternative but to call for the removal. You remember, we said we wanted a referendum, and they provided us with a template of how to collect signatures. We went around the country collecting signatures, millions of signatures. When we presented them, they used a technicality to rubbish all that, and instead of allowing us, if we were short by a few hundreds, to fill the gap, they said the process was closed. In other words, they did not want a referendum to be held. So we knew that if we went on with this kind of electoral commission to the next elections, nothing was going to change. doing the same thing, the same way, hoping to get a different results, is stupidity. That's why we said we needed that IBC to go so that we could have a new IBC in its place. What is happening right now is that there's nothing wrong with the current commission. What has happened is that they retained the same secretariat which was part of the IBC that had gone. And then there is still interference by the National Intelligence Service in the work of the IBC. That is the reason why.
Mr. Odinga, do you have proof of these things that you say?
Joe, Linus, sorry. I told you that I never talk in vain. When I speak, I'm speaking from the point of view of information, which is from an inside, because I have my sources inside. So what I'm talking about is just wild allegations. There are issues which can be substantiated, and indeed, we have written to the Electoral Commission, we have written to the Inspector General of Police, we have written also to the head of the military, drawing their attention to the information that is in our position.
Right. Let me come to the issue of defense and national security, which is one of our topics on leadership. And Honorable Odinga, you've stated several times that you want Kenyan troops out of Somalia. But you've never, with clarity, indicated how you intend to tackle the persistent problem of terrorism, especially Al-Shabaab activities inside Kenya, Lamu, and other coastal areas. What do you propose to do after pulling troops out if elected president?
Joe, I was at the National Security when we took a decision to send our troops into Somalia. But I had, as a Prime Minister then, to go to Parliament, move a motion seeking parliamentary authority for us to deploy our troops. We called it Operation Linda Inch, meaning that Operation Defend Our Country. They moved into Somalia. Then we got information from the military that just pushing the Shabaab in Somalia will not amount to much unless we liberated the port of Kismayu, which was their main source of supply. We did apply for international support. The US declined, the EU also declined. So we therefore decided to use our own military, the Air Force, the Navy, and the Land Army to liberate the port of Kismayu. That caused a relief to Ugandan troops which were marooned in Mogadishu. Thereafter, we should have retreated back to our borders. But what happened was our troops were then rehatted and made part of the AMISOM troops inside Somalia. In the meantime, the Al-Shabaab has continued to penetrate our territory and carry out attacks in Mandera, in Wajir, in Lamu, and so on and so forth. The AU had passed a resolution saying that neighboring countries should not send their troops into their neighbors' territory for fear of retaliatory attacks. We have now witnessed to these retaliatory attacks. We saw what happened in Westgate. We've seen what has been happening around. So what we said is that we need to withdraw our troops strategically from Somalia to our border and seal our border and provide strategic support to the AMISOM troops inside Somalia. And then at the same time, increase our intelligence here, intelligence gathering, so that we can be able to nip any pending attacks in the bud. We saw what happened in Mandera, saw what happened in Westgate the other time. I want to say that if I'm president, I will not be watching the Formula 4 in Dubai when Al-Shabaab are attacking our people in Westgate. I will lead from the front. And I think that this government has not done exactly what is needed to provide sufficient security for our people.
Honorable Odinga, sticking to the Al-Shabaab question, I would like you to respond to some of the accusations that have been coming through from the government. Back in 2015, I think, when Mpeketoni was attacked, President Kenyatta, who is not here tonight, claimed that the attack in Mpeketoni was political. Last week, in the wake of the attack that included the kidnap of PS Mariam El-Mawi, Coast Regional Coordinator Marwa Nelson claimed that politicians were behind these attacks. Both suggestions by the president and Marwa were pointing inwards, that is within Kenya, that politicians within Kenya were behind Al-Shabaab attacks.
It is most unfortunate, Linus, that the government, and particularly the president, should be playing internal politics with the matter of security, particularly where the lives of Kenyans is concerned. At that time, allegation was made that it was a work of some local leaders. And remember, the Lamu governor actually was supposedly accused. And of course, he came out saying he had nothing to do with it, and nothing has happened to him. But Marwa himself, with these other people, they organized attack of innocent Kenyans in Likoni, supposedly as a retaliation to what had happened in Lamu. The Al-Shabaab, of course, owned up and said that they are the ones who are responsible for the attack in Lamu. The other time, we saw what was happening in Garissa, the attacks in Garissa. You see the level of unpreparedness of our forces. When students were attacked in Garissa and they were crying for assistance, it took more than 7 hours for us to send support from Nairobi, for the Kenya Air Force to send support to go and rescue those students in Garissa. On national days, you always see the parades and the air shows. Oh, jeshi letu la taifa, kila mara wako tayari kutulinda. Ndio ni hawa mnaona wanaanga, naona hawa. They were not there when the Kenyans needed them at that time. And the same thing has happened in Lamu. Instead of actually taking what is happening in Lamu seriously, they are playing politics with it. This is very serious and is the most unfortunate that this should be coming from what is supposed to be the commander-in-chief of the armed forces of our republic.
Honorable Odinga, the structure of this debate was supposed to accommodate your opponent, Uhuru Kenyatta, who has not turned up, but I'm sure he's watching. And we are going to be taking a break in a short while and continue with the second part. But before that, I need you to address questions of integrity. What is your position on integrity? Because you've been accused many times of taking positions that are convenient. In corruption scandals, for example, affecting political personalities close to you, you do not come out as strongly as you come out on other cases. My colleague Joe Ageo will be addressing the issue of corruption, but I'll just ask you on the bit of your personal handling of the 2008 food security strategic grain reserves importation, in which your own Chief of Staff, Karolio Mondi, signed, and this was captured by a PwC report that indicated that that was unprocedural. And indeed, you were also in the middle of what was then a maize importation scandal.
Yes, Joe, thank you very much for that question. Now, let me go straight to that specific question you've asked about maize scandal. Remember, the maize scandal itself was a bigger scandal But before I go to actions I took, there were people who had been mentioned, including ministers in that maize country. There were two of my officers, my chief of staff and my permanent secretary. I immediately asked them to step aside so that the investigations could be carried out. With respect to Mr. Karoli Omondi, the investigations were carried out by PricewaterhouseCoopers. Because yes, Mr. Karoli Omondi had signed authorizing the National Cereals Board to do the importation. What had happened was that there had been delays by the ministry and the NCPB to place the order for maize consignment coming from South Africa. As a result of which, the prices had gone up because the port of Durban was not available and they had to ship to Maputo. We had to go to cabinet to seek cabinet authority to pay additional 14 million shillings for that consignment. Once the cabinet had authorized, I instructed Karoli Omondi to inform the Cereals Board that they must place the order immediately so that the cost does not go up again. The Cereals Board then demanded that he signs that he had authorized. I told him the memo was going to come from then the head of public service, Mr. Mdaura, containing the cabinet approval. That cabinet approval was eventually shown to Pricewaterhouse. Mr. Karoli Omondi was cleared. The same thing with my permanent secretary. But you need to know that I also suspended the minister in charge of agriculture, who had been giving his friends letters to go and take maize from the National Cereals Board, the current deputy president. But that decision was countermanded by the president.
And I would like you, Honorable Odinga, to be more clear on the issues you're addressing right there. The meeting of the 30th July 2008 in your office, attended by Naomi Sheban, Minister for Special Programs, William Ruto, Minister for Agriculture, and John Mishuki, Minister for Finance. And from our sources, this meeting was split because you preferred yourself getting maize from South Africa. Naomi Sheban and William Ruto, on the other hand, preferred to get it from Tanzania. And it seemed, according to the details of that meeting, that you lost that argument.
I did not lose the argument. I was the prime minister. I did not lose an argument. We were very flexible. It needs to be known that at that time we were looking for maize which was GM-free. And it happened out that at that time it was only in South Africa. Tanzania had actually banned maize importation because they themselves had a shortage of maize and they were not going to export to Kenya. Even at the cabinet, when we were told that there was maize, we sent the Minister for Agriculture to Dar es Salaam and arranged for him to go and meet with the President Kikwete, who was then in Bagamoyo. And the answer was clear. Now, Madam Naomi Shaban was talking about us getting maize through panya routes from Tanzania into Kenya. And we told her we cannot allow, as a government, to import maize illegally from our neighbor. That does not happen. And that's why I said, no, we cannot do that to Tanzania when they have banned maize exports. So we therefore made a decision to import the maize from South Africa. But because there was delays, the South African company had said that they had limited space at the Durban port. If the order was not placed by a certain date, they would have to ship, to transport this maize by road to Maputo, and that would result in additional costs. And they were still haggling whether to bring from Tanzania, whether to bring from Mexico, or the other sources they were talking, West Africa, in Cote d'Ivoire. The opportunity to ship was lost. And the cost therefore went up by $14 million. And when they wanted us to place the order, I said, no, we cannot place the order because there's additional $14 million. We have to go back to the cabinet to seek cabinet approval. That was the reason why there was delay.
But the import of all these events, Honorable Odinga, would it be right to put it to you that none of you really meant well?
Pardon?
None of you really meant well. Both yourself on one side, William Ruto and Naomi Shaban on the other side, your interest was to get selected importers to do this for purposes of profiteering.
Linus, the work of a prime minister was basically coordination. That's how my office came in. That's why there was Ministry of Finance, there was Ministry of Agriculture, there was Ministry of Special Programs. Ministry of Finance, because they were paying, Ministry of Special Programs, they were the users, and Ministry of Agriculture, for obvious reasons. So the decisions were basically theirs. My office was basically just coordinating to ensure that these things were working smoothly. And that was the decision which was taken jointly between the president and myself. So we did not even know the companies which were going to export to maize. That the tendering was done by the NCPB. Everything was done under the Ministry of Special Programs and Ministry of Agriculture. Us was just to sit down, and these were brought for us, and to decide that this is what is workable, this is what is working in terms of our interests as a country. This is where we are going to get value for our money as a government. So we were not involved. Office of the Prime Minister does not procure. The Prime Minister just coordinates the functions of the government.
Integrity is the question, and Honorable Odinga, that on that note, we take a short break. When we come back, Joe Agio, my colleague, will be proceeding with this, forward with this conversation. Join us shortly after this.
All right. Welcome back to Debate 2017, happening here at the Catholic University of Eastern Africa. My name is Joe Agay of KTN News. My colleague Lina Skaikai has been driving the first part of that debate, and I'll take you through the next one. Now, if I will request the Honorable Raila Odinga, if you could take your place at the podium, please. And please feel free to call me Joe this time, because I am. But if you're okay to handle it from there, that is fine. That is fine. Okay, Mr. Odinga, we are speaking about national unity. That's the next topic that we are going to tackle in this segment. And a few weeks ago, you made a statement in Kajiado that has caused uproar in the country. In fact, your opponent, President Kenyatta, who is not here today, has charged that this is a statement that could have caused a threat to the country's unity. And you mentioned words to the effect, wanakuja kwako kufanya nini, si akae huko. What was the context of this statement, and do you now regret it, given the kind of conversation it has created in the country?
Joe, on the contrary, I don't regret any word that I uttered on that day. I meant every word that I said at that time. I was addressing the issue of poverty of the people in that area. Those people are pastoralists. Ordinarily, pastoralists don't have to be poor. You see, in Botswana, for a long time was running an economy based on pastoralism. And the pastoralists were very rich and very healthy. But here, because we have not managed it properly, KMC is almost dead, so therefore the pastoralists don't even have proper places where they can sell their animals and get proper prices for it. So these people have been forced, therefore, to sell their land in order to make ends meet. Somebody's wife is sick. You want to take the wife for treatment? No money. You want to pay school fees for his children? It's no money. You want to put bread on the table? It's no money. Because of this, he sells the only piece of land that he has in order to be able to make ends meet. And therefore, it is inheriting his children. So I told him that we are going to make sure that you can live comfortably on your animals, so that you don't have to sell land, so that you become destitute, or your children become destitute. This is what I was talking about. And I said that this issue needs to be addressed through the issue of land. address it properly through TGRC report.
And Mr. Odinga, I'll come to the TGRC in a moment, but you do understand that land is an emotive issue in this country, and you can understand if people who live in Kajiado, who are non-Maasai, if you like, are jittery about a statement like that, because many of them seem to have understood it to mean that you would like them, when you take over, to leave that part of the country.
Joe, I meant what I said. I never said that people should leave. I said don't sell. In other words, there are people who have already bought. I'm not talking about people who have already bought, who have got titles and so on. I'm saying that we're going to reach a stage where it should not be forced to sell. But there are people who have got a lot of land in Kajiado. Those people with excess land should sell. Nobody is saying they should not sell at all. I'm only talking about people with limited amounts of land who are forced to dispose of the land because of economic reasons. This is what I never said, but Mr. Kenyatta was playing politics. Oh, Raila wanted people to be evicted and to go back to where you came from. And I never say that. In Kajiado, there are members of so many other communities who live there, not only Kajiado, even Narok, in several other places. I would never say to go back to where you came from. I was addressing the Maasais, that because of your poverty, you have been forced to sell your land. We will deal with the poverty so that you don't have to sell your land, period.
So if there's someone in Kajiado right now who's feeling worried about what you said that day, what do you tell them tonight? That
they should sit comfortable. They don't have to worry at all. Raila, Odinga want to see Kenya as an integrated society. So many communities live in Kajiado. Just next door to where we are here, you have got this settlement called Ongata Rongai. There you'll find very many Kisis there. In fact, our candidate for the member of parliament for Kajiado North is a Kisi. The current member of parliament there is a Kikuyu. There are Kambas, there are lawyers who live there. You have got the Luos also who live there. So it is a cosmopolitan community, and people should live comfortably. You've got this urbanization which is taking place in our country. People are migrating to urban settlements, and this is a permanent feature of our development. This is an idea which you cannot kill. It will happen. Our society will be integrated. What is important is to ensure that each and every Kenyan, wherever they live, have their rights protected. I don't think that it even serves a purpose to create another tribe that now yesterday I saw that the Indians have now been given, classified as the 44th tribe of Kenya.
All right, we will speak about the Indians much later, but let me ask you about the TGRC because you brought it up. Your opponents, and specifically the Deputy President William Ruto, has said that implementing the TGRC is a recipe for chaos in the country. How specifically do you believe the TGRC will solve the problem of land, for example, in the country, and historical injustices in general?
Joe, this was part of the Agenda 4 of the Serena process. So we, therefore, as a Grand Coalition government, set up the commission, the TGRC commission, which was like an international commission because we had commissioners from Australia, from Zambia, from Ireland, part of that commission. And they traveled around the country asking Kenyans of their views about historical injustices. A lot of money was spent on that commission. So at the end of it, they compiled that report, which details out the historical injustices from the time. This is very similar to what they did in South Africa, when Mandela appointed a commission led by Archbishop Desmond Tutu. And that helped them to deal with the past violations of human rights under the apartheid regime and reconcile the South African society. That whole process has not happened in this country. So for a deputy president to go on record saying that TGRC is going to open all wounds, what is important is just to issue title deeds, basically exhibits his ignorance of the reality in this country.
So walk us through this whole process. So assuming you get elected in the next 2 weeks, you get into State House, what do you do with the TGRC? How does that look like so that we can begin to understand how these problems will be solved through that report?
When I'm elected, and you mark the word when, not if, I'm elected.
Well, I'm sure Kenyans will have something to say about that on August 8th, but
Yes.
we can proceed.
Okay. No, we have said clearly as NASA that we shall implement the provisions of the TGRC report. By the way, the TGRC also is drawn from the constitution of the country. Part of what is in the TGRC recommendation is also in the constitution, which, for example, has got a chapter on land, and that chapter created what we call community land. You've got community land, you've got private land, then you've got public land. Now, that community land is supposed to be administered by the representatives of the community, the county government, and the National Land Commission. The first thing that the Jubilee government did, President Uhuru Kenyatta, when they went, was to water down the subsidiary legislation which were under draft, which had been prepared by the Grand Coalition Government, Ministry of Lands, to go and amend those provisions and remove the power from the community and the county government and bring in the cabinet secretary. So basically, just bringing back the old system which was responsible for the mess that we have in the land sector today. We will ensure that this is reversed so that the community has the final say on the community land generally.
All right, so let's talk about another issue that relates very closely to this, and this is the question of tribalism in this country. Many Kenyans know for a fact that when the elections are held in the next 2 weeks, most likely in Kisumu, you will have more votes than President Kenyatta, and he will have more votes than you in Nyeri, and that has happened over the last 50 years. From where you sit, what is the problem with this country insofar as tribalism is concerned? Why do we vote generally along tribal lines, and what will you do if you became president to deal with that problem?
Joe, I don't think that there's something really very unique. Some people are just naive. You see, even if you go to the UK, the country is owned. There is what's called the Tory safe seats and the Labour safe seats. The seats which are known are going to be won by Labour, the ones which will be won by the Tories. If you go to the United States, see in the elections, some states are painted red, others are blue. That is normal. And there's also what is called...
But in fairness, Mr. Odinga, that is often driven by the issues that matter. There could be agricultural areas, there could be workers and that sort of thing. Here it's purely because it is Luos that live here, it is Kikuyus that live here, and therefore they vote in a different way.
No, Joe. There's also what they call their homeboy mentality. See, like it is known that Clinton was going to win in Arkansas because he's the homeboy there. He grew up there. He's known better there by the people. So the fact that Uhuru Kenyatta will get more votes in Kiambu than me, because they see him, this is our boy. It's a homeboy mentality. But if we leave Kiambu, I go with him to the coast, I will get more votes than him in the coast. I go with him to Northeastern, I will get more votes than him in the Northeastern. I will also get more votes than him in Western. Those people don't vote for me because I'm a Luo, I'm their own. They vote for me because of what I represent. So that is where you get the balancing. That after he has left his community, you now go to other communities who will vote merely on what somebody stands for.
So is tribalism a problem in this country, according to you?
what is a problem here is ethnic inclusivity or exclusivity. And that's what we want to address. Like right now, the Jubilee government has basically divided this country. They have basically have got two people with their friends, not their communities. Because I would be wrong to say that the president represents his community. Because I know of a number of Kikuyus who don't believe in what is happening. They say that this is just a club of friends and family members who are benefiting from this regime. And likewise his deputy. So we are going to expand this the governance structure of this country and be more inclusive to ensure that every Kenyan, irrespective of their ethnic origin, get equal opportunities and that there's no community that is excluded.
But Mr. Odinga, people who look at your own record often charge that while you were Prime Minister, that your office had quite a number of people from your ethnic community, and that as a matter of fact, even in your politics, there are people who are related to you who often get nominations to run on your ticket, and that somehow your politics has also been defined by tribal inclined decisions.
Joe, if you go and look at the list of officers in the office of the Prime Minister, it was the most inclusive office that has ever existed. Because it was new, we started it, and most of the heads of departments came from all parts of the country. Even the junior staff in the office of the Prime Minister came from all over the country. So that allegation does not bear the reality on the ground. And the facts are there, you can go and examine them. You come to people who are appointed. I did not know, Joe, that if you are now in the government, you are Prime Minister, then none of anybody remotely related to you can be employed by the government. I didn't know that. The only person who was employed was my sister, who was employed as an officer, consulate in LA. And she was a competent Kenyan. She got a PhD. And she was chosen by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, had nothing to do with it. But if I were to begin now, I don't want to embarrass President Uhuru Kenyatta. If you want to look at this Jubilee government.
But you have accused him, for example, of allowing his relatives to do business with government. What's the difference?
Which relative of mine was doing the business with government when I was in government?
Well, you said some were employed when you were in government.
I just mentioned one case. I don't know which other one. I don't know any other one, because that is the one they've been talking about. And that amount to be too many. And that was also a junior position, just a consular, not an ambassador at all. But if you look at the government today, if you begin to do a roll call, I think the government will be embarrassed. So I don't want to go along that line.
Okay, Mr. Odinga, you have about 1.1 million followers on Twitter, and there's a lot of hate going on there. And I haven't seen you, for example, use your Twitter handle to say something about it. There are a lot of people who say bad things to other Kenyans in your name.
Joe, social media is a free media. You don't regulate it. You don't even know who is speaking there. Sometimes people put your name there and they speak on your behalf. So I don't want to interfere in the freedom of expression. People say all sorts of things that they want to say, and I don't want to regulate it. It's a freedom of expression, and it's something that is new. Maybe you people in mainstream media are also not used to it.
Are you saying you have no responsibility there as a leader? Because there are people who say that social media funds violence. If, for example, there's violence in this election, that would be a very active playing ground, no?
I have no brief for people in the social media, but you need to know that social media exists also in the United States, in Britain, and so on. I see Mr. Kaparu talking about how he's going to gag social media, how he wants to stop them. hate speech, and so on. I hope this is not an excuse to do what they did in Uganda during the election time, shutting off the internet so that they could exclude social media. I think that is a freedom of expression which should not be interfered with.
All right, Mr. Odinga, before we move to the next stage where we'll open this to the audience here, I want us to revisit an issue that my colleague Linus touched on, and this is the issue of corruption as our next segment here. And you said that one of the reasons why the cost of living is rising in this country, and one of the reasons why you believe the country is headed in the wrong direction, is because of runaway corruption. As president, if you get elected, what will be your specific role in the fight against corruption?
Joe, corruption exists virtually in every country. The difference is that in some countries, when it is uncovered, action is taken against the people who are involved. And that is where we are different. That's the reason why Kenya ranks very high in the Transparency International Anti-Corruption Index. I think this now rank Kenya as the third most corrupt country in the world. Kenya is playing in the Super League of corruption. The giants like Nicaragua, Sri Lanka, DR Congo, and so on.
But even during your time as Prime Minister, we still were ranked together with Nepal and Nicaragua.
No, we were lower. We were lower. We have climbed much higher now. But what was happening is that we kept on going lower and lower from where we took it when we took over from Kanu.
But tell us what, as president, you would do.
What I'm saying is the action is what is lacking. And here I say that the buck stops with the president, that action needs to be taken. When we were forming this NASA coalition, we sat down among ourselves and deliberated seriously on this issue. That's why you'll find it in our coalition agreement. You say that every member of this club will ensure that they don't do business with government. And that includes also their relatives. And that action will be taken against public servants who are involved in any kind of corrupt act. If you find a situation where a president convenes a meeting in the State House to talk about corruption, and then admits publicly, I've done this, I've done this, I've done this, and this, what do you want me to do? I've failed. Basically, expressing failure. I say, Mr. President, the buck stops with you. If you have failed, then pack up and go home.
Well, that's fair enough, and that's easy to say. But I have listened to the president when he speaks about corruption, and I think this is what he says, that he has ensured his government has provided money to the agencies. He says all the commissions are independent, EACC, Directorate of Criminal Investigations, the courts are independent, and that he fired certain people from his cabinet, which was within his powers to do, and that based on what the Constitution says, there's nothing left for him to do. If you were in that situation, what is that other thing you would have done as President Raila Odinga?
First, Mr. President needs to allow the independent institution to work independently. He took a list which had been given just for information, names which were still under investigations. And because he was in a hurry, he went and tabled it in Parliament. Some of those people had not been found guilty. There was no sufficient evidence against them. And he tarnished names of very many innocent people. Then, on the other one, when we looked at that list, we found that a number of names were actually been missing. Some names had been expunged from it. And I challenged him. And I said there was a name here of then the Minister for Devolution, which was here and has been removed. And I showed him where the name had been removed. Then came the NYS case. And I told him, I know what is happening. in Kibra. I know how NYS was being looted. And I said, the suspect is so-and-so. They came out and said, I should leave that lady alone, that I should face them directly, himself and his deputy. He called a press conference in State House. When later on evidence emerged linking that minister with that scandal, Deputy President went to a church in Githurai and said that that lady should stop speaking too much English. She must answer. You know, for your information, Joe, that lady is the candidate of Jubilee for gubernatorial elections in Kirinyaga.
So what would you have done, Mr. Odinga?
I would have taken action, a la Magafuli style. I would have Magafulied her.
So take the NYS case, for example. What would you have done about it that is different from what President Kenyatta did?
NYS case?
Yes.
There was glaring evidence. Those companies which were formed are all fictitious names. They're basically people who are fronting, or the people behind it. It's very easy to find out who is behind this company, this company, this company. I can even tell you the individuals who are involved. I will ensure that action is taken, that money is recovered and put to good use. I told you that the mega corruption of Jubilee, amounting to about 350 billion shillings, this was responsible for our plight today here. Every Kenyan is owed 7,500 shillings by the Jubilee government. Every shilling that they spend, 1 shilling is lost, is going to people's private pockets. So they come up with budgets of billions and billions. You put billions in health, billions in education, billions here. All those billions don't go to proper use. They're all misappropriated. I mean, a big chunk of it.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Odinga. We want to move to another special segment in our conversation. This is behind us, and my colleague Linus Kaikai is going to take the first question with the audience.
That's right, indeed. We do have the audience seated in here, and we've also received very many questions by email prior to this debate, and we do appreciate the number of questions that we did receive, and apologize that it will not be possible to have all those questions answered. A lot of questions directly asked to President Uhuru Kenyatta, and a lot of questions asked directly to Honorable Raila Odinga. From the audience now here, let me bring in some of the people who are here to raise their questions directly. And first to go, Phyllis Omido. Phyllis, your question, please.
Thank you to the organizers and Your Excellency. We honor you for coming. Thank you for respecting Kenyans. The largest contributor to climate change is carbon emissions. And this is mostly from large business projects that are very tragic, like the Lamu coal plant. Kenya has had a maize crisis, which government has largely blamed on climate change. But even after acknowledging the contribution of climate change to food security, both manifestos were silent on mitigation measures to our communities, to the Kenyan citizens, especially the farmer and the poor. So even though I know your manifesto offered us a leeway in terms of environmental and social impact assessment before setting up of projects, would like to know, in cases like the Lamu coal project, which is a very tragic project to put up in such a place because of the impacts to the ecosystems and communities, what would you do as the executive to address this issue, bearing in mind that Article 69 and 70 is not affordable to communities, to poor communities like the ones in Lamu?
No, I really want this question framed again.
That's fine. Phyllis will come back to you. Let's go to Flora Nyaga. Flora, are you in? Please ask your question. Phyllis will come back to you.
Thank you. My name is Flora Nyaga from Embu County. Honorable Odinga, please tell us how you have prioritized the main challenges that you will be faced with should you win the forthcoming general elections. And how will you translate these into realities in terms of solutions for the ordinary Kenyans? Thank you.
Thank you, Flora. I think, Honorable Odinga, you can answer that straight away. What are your priorities when you win the election in terms of the issues that she considers challenges?
Well, she did not, Flora, thank you very much. You did not enumerate issues that you wanted me to talk about. We have got issues of the cost of living, you've got issues of unemployment, you've got issues of corruption, which are major issues afflicting Kenyans at the moment. And we have got issues of devolution. Let me begin first with devolution. We have stated clearly that when we take over, we will devolve more resources to the county governments so that they can be able to meet the challenges that are facing them with respect to devolved functions. So we said we will increase it from 15% to 45%. And that is a commitment that we have. In regard to issues of unemployment, 40% of our population is unemployed. You can say roughly 12 million youths are out there on the streets who are unemployed. This situation is unacceptable. And we say that we are going to look at areas where we can be able to create employment faster. And that's why I said we'll address the informal sector, where 13 million Kenyans are employed at the moment. This is a sector that is more elastic, where more opportunities can be created. You have said we are going to set up industrial parks in all the 47 counties, which will give youth opportunity to be more productively engaged. There they will have the facilities, the equipment, they will receive training so that they have the skills, and they will have also access to capital so that they can work. Then the issue of the cost of living, yes. We will also address the issue of food production to be able to provide for our ever-expanding population, which is not the cost at the moment.
And in order of priority, Honorable Odinga, if I understood for Anyaga well, what are you going for first as soon as you take office?
First, the issue of putting food on the table, reducing the cost of living for the people. This is our priority number one. And we will address the issues of cereals, like unga, so that we can be able to lower the price of maize flour in the country. We can deal with issues of sugar, issues of milk, and so on. We deal with issues of wages, we deal with issues of rent, as I've mentioned, the issues of the cost of transport, particularly for the urban, and the housing issues.
I'd like us to take as many questions as we can, so I would like to bring in Josephine Mongare. Josephine, your question?
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Minister, Prime Minister. My name is Josephine Mongare. I'm the FIDA chairperson. And as women of Kenya, we have felt very, very excluded in the current setup. When we look at your coalition, we look at the Jubilee coalition, we do not see you women being prioritized and being at the front of these election campaigns. Now, seeing the data from the IEBC, women have only managed 9% of candidacy. This clearly means that the National Assembly and the Senate will not make the one-third constitutional requirement. Would like you to share with us today, as women of Kenya, what are your strategies should your government take over on the 9th of August? What strategies do you have to bridge that gap? One, in your government, and two, in parliament. Because we have done what we could do as the women of Kenya to make sure that the 11th parliament passed a law which was not possible. Now we are going to an election, and clearly we will not achieve one-third gender role. Thank you.
Thank you, Josephine.
Yeah, the issue of women inclusion is very central to our policy. And when we're talking about this, it is not just a question of women being members of county assembly, members of parliament, members of the Senate. We're talking about opportunities available for women in society generally, because that's where we're going to absorb more women. Because we're talking about parliament, you're talking about just 350-something people. It's pretty very few. There, what we need is to have a law passed. And as you know, although Jubilee had said they were going to do it, the parliament was closed without them doing it. And in parliament, we had what was called tyranny of numbers. We, as NASA, were very committed to having that law passed. But Jubilee denied us the opportunity to do it. That's why it is important to vote wisely, vote more NASA members of parliament, so that we can go and pass the law that will then bring more women into parliament.
All right, Mr. Odinga, thank you very much. Our next question will come from Malim.
Thank you so much, Joe. The Right Honorable Prime Minister, Harun Maalim. According to Kenyan population, about 1.3 million Kenyans have disability. But World Health Organization refuted that and put about 6 million. And as a country, we have beautiful laws. The Disability Act, the current Constitution, and even the Convention on the Right of Persons with Disability. Unfortunately, up to today, there is no policy that operationalizes those laws to make services accessible to these most marginalized communities. From 2006, National Disability Policy is still a draft. When you will be elected as a president in your first 100 days, what will you promise these Kenyans who feel, despite these great laws, they are still at peripheries in accessing the services? And I wish you good luck in your campaigns. Thank you.
A very specific question, Mr. Odinga, about disability.
We'll ensure that the National Disability Policy is passed together with the enabling legislation, so that the people with disabilities can be adequately catered for. When I was Minister for Public Works, I actually came up with the regulations to ensure that all public buildings are user-friendly to people with disability. So it is something that we are genuinely committed to ensure that people with disability are given equal opportunity. Because as I believe, disability is not inability, and therefore they must be given opportunity to serve the country.
Thank you, and that will be the final question from the audience. Honorable Odinga, 2 more questions from this desk as moderators of the night. My first question to you, Honorable Odinga, is you come from a family, one of 2 families that have for the last 50 years plus dominated Kenyan politics. How would you respond to perceptions that these 2 families have held Kenyan politics hostage, literally, and with 2 characteristics? One family moving with a sense of entitlement in terms of leadership, and another with a sense of victimhood. Entitlement on the Kenyatta family and victimhood on the Odinga family. What do you say to those perceptions?
I think they're very misconceived perceptions. First, begin at the beginning. Jomo Kenyatta initially was a freedom fighter, and he was imprisoned by the colonialists for 9 years, kept under very inhuman conditions. Jaramogi, on the other hand, became a freedom fighter and fought for the release of Kenyatta. And when Kenyatta was released, Kenyatta then became the president, Jaramogi became the vice president. So they earned those positions by virtue of the fact that they sacrificed for the freedom of this country. So it was not like entitlement. The Kenyan people voluntarily elected them to those positions at that time. They disagreed in the course of implementation of policies during independence. And Jaramogi resigned from the government and went into opposition. The rest is history. Jaramogi became a leader of the opposition until he died. I, on my side, I was involved in what we call the second liberation, not by invitation from my father, but basically out of conviction. And therefore I was not in politics because my father introduced me to politics. I came into politics alone, and I've been in politics because of what I think is right for this country. As you know, I've also been in political detention for a long time. You saw me walk away from that place because of that light interferes with me, and you see my eyes sometimes watering because of the damages I suffered when I was in the detention and the poor lighting in detention. That is what damaged my eyes. Now, I have continued on this because I represent the force for change in the country. Uhuru Kenyatta then was introduced to politics by the former president, Daniel Arap Moi, who then picked him as his preferred heir when he was quitting politics. So Uhuru came in by invitation from his mentor, former President Daniel Arap Moi. But he's then remained now an actor on his own when Moi left the stage. So he's also not here because his father brought him into the stage. He's a Kenyan, like any other Kenyan. So I think it would be very unfair to infer that we have held this country hostage as families.
I think you've answered the question, and I will also be asking you about your relationship with Uhuru Kenyatta in a moment, but I think there's an audience question that we had skipped, Joe.
Yes, and that was from Phyllis Omido. So we can do that before we wrap things up here. Phyllis.
Thank you. So the biggest contributor to climate change is carbon emissions. This is mainly from big business, especially tragic projects like the Lamu coal plant. Kenya has had a maize crisis that government has largely blamed on climate change. And yet, even after acknowledging contributions of climate change to food security, all the manifestos were silent in terms of mitigation of impacts of climate change to our communities. Now, even though your manifesto gave a leeway in terms of environmental social impact assessment before projects, I would like to know that for cases like the Lamu coal plant, where it's clear that the social environmental impacts will be irreversibly terrible for the communities, what would you do as an executive to protect communities from such impacts?
Well, we know that the climate change is a major threat to survival of humanity generally. And that's the reason why it's an issue that must be handled internationally. Debate on climate change all over the world. As a Prime Minister, I was very much involved in these matters. We as a country need to take action to protect our environment, to basically reduce the carbon emission coming from our country. Remember, I was responsible for conservation and protection of our water towers, which are 5 generally, and several others. We as NASA actually have discussed that issue, and that's why in our manifesto we're talking about doing due diligence on projects before they are sanctioned. You are talking specifically about a project in Lamu. But I just want to tell you that coal plants still exist all over the world. You go to China, they're there. You go to Europe, they're there. In the United States, they're there. There's what is called clean coal. Clean coal as opposed to just ordinary coal plants. So that is an issue that needs to be looked at more comprehensively rather than just emotionally. And you know that in those other countries, there exists not just one plant. There are several plants. So the clean coal projects generally are acceptable internationally. So this is what we need to debate. What kind of system are they putting up in Lamu? Because I know the environmentalists sometimes go overboard. You remember when we were setting up the Sondu Miriu project in Sondu, there was a lot of noise. The Tiomen plant in Kwale elicited also a lot of opposition. I think these are issues that we must look at on a case-by-case basis in order to justify actions that are being taken by the government. If the Lamu coal is a project that is going to destroy or interfere with the environment, of course we will not accept it. So it depends on what technology they're going to use.
Thank you, Honorable Odinga. We have two final questions before we allow you to make your closing statement. And earlier on, you defended both the Kenyatta and Odinga family about their role in politics. And I now want to come specifically to your relationship with President Uhuru Kenyatta. In one of your many football commentaries, Honorable Odinga, you once said, in my presence as a reporter, that Uhuru ameanguka chini, sijui amekunywa nini, which in effect was a suggestion about sobriety or drunkenness. Last week, a few weeks ago, you sat quietly behind one of your political surrogates as he called Uhuru Mlevi and DP William Ruto Mwizi. Now, to their side, very many times, speaking in his Kikuyu language, Uhuru Kenyatta has referred to you as Mogoroki and Kimudu, which in my little understanding of the Kikuyu language means a madman. The deputy president calls you, not with in complimentary terms, mtu wa vitendawili. This is basically your language, the language of Uhuru and the language of Raila. Do you approve of this kind of language for this level of leadership? Two people with a mathematical chance of becoming president.
I don't remember ever saying that Uhuru amenguka na sijui amekunywa nini. But even if I'd said it, it must have been with a light touch, that amekunywa nini. But that will not mean that he is a drunkard at all. And when you're talking about one of my, you call him my surrogate, or I think that is not a fair comment on a honorable member of parliament, if that is what you mean. I mean, there are political jokes. If somebody says that the vehicle is being driven by a drunkard driver and a town boy who is a thief, I don't think he was meaning Uhuru or Ruto, unless they themselves feel guilty. I think that is just said with a light touch. Politics must come up with some jokes. And like when Uhuru refers to me as Kimundu Muguruki, I don't think he means it. I don't think he thinks I'm a madman. But that basically means that the kitchen is too hot for him. So if the kitchen is too hot, get out of the kitchen. See? And the deputy president, Ateo William Zewa Vitendawili. You see, that means there's something that is issuing him about Vitendawili. And I say that Pilipili Shoila, Yakuashani, if you're having a problem with it, just leave it. So we in NASA, we basically respond seriously to allegations that are made, but we also respond in kind and sometimes in jokes. If the Jubilee becomes very irresponsible, we tell them what we think should be right. That is politics, in my view.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Odinga. Finally, there are a lot of Kenyans who are worried about the election we will have in the next 2 weeks. As a matter of fact, there are Kenyans who are stocking up. There are Kenyans who are making plans to travel to different places. There are even some foreign missions that are issuing some travel advisories around this election. Do you share those concerns, Mr. Odinga?
I would love to inform Kenyans that Kenyans have a constitutional right to participate in these elections. I think there's some scarecrow. Some people are basically trying to scare Kenyans because they want to deprive those Kenyans of their constitutional right to vote. So people are being told, oh, there's going to be violence around. Some notes have even been written threatening some people so that the people can run away, particularly from urban areas, to go to safety. I have urged our supporters not to fall to this, that they should stay put. I don't see any problems happening. We have said that there will be no violence in Kenya so long as elections are free and fair. And the government has assured us that they are not going to interfere. The IEBC has assured us that the elections are going to be free and fair. So we should not be scared. People should not run away from where they're staying, because by running away, you are actually depriving us of your vote, either Jubilee or NASA. So we want these elections to be won fairly. And we want Jubilee to also desist from trying to manipulate the electoral results, as I mentioned earlier on, using the security forces. We want to win fairly. And if we win fairly, fine. You've also said that in the unlikely event of us losing, we will congratulate Jubilee. They've been asking me all the time, are you going to accept results? We will accept free, fair electoral results, outcome. If they're free and fair, we will accept them.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Odinga.
Before you leave,
we will welcome you to make your closing comments.
Thanks. Let me stand up here. There are two groups of people I did not address. One issue of housing, I did not address it in the context that we are discussing it as NASA. That we are going to invest heavily on low-cost housing that is affordable to the population.
Yep. So that, please use the microphone.
You're free to use it.
Yes. That we are going to invest as NASA in low-cost housing, which is the problem right now. That's why people are having issues in the slums. That our youth can get decent housing when they get married as families. That happened in Hong Kong, in Singapore, in Malaysia. Okay? The other one are the single mothers. These young ladies who either have divorced or their husbands have died or they just got children. These mothers are having serious problems bringing up families. We say that we are going to pay special attention to this group so that they can be able to access capital, so that they can be able to do business or get employment, so that they can be able to look after their children properly. Finally, I just want to tell Kenyans that we are on the brink of history as a country. It has been a long journey to reach where we have reached today as a people. 8th of August is going to remain in the annals of our history as a very historic day for our people. Every Kenyan who is able, who was registered as a voter, must turn out to cast their vote to participate in history making. I'm sure that at the end of the day, Kenyans are going to emerge victorious. So we urge you, whether you're a Jubilee supporter, or you're a NASA supporter, turn up and vote for us, because Nane Nane will remain forever a very important day in your life. Thank you very much Asanteni sana wa Kenya kwa kunisikiliza. Ni juta ya kwamba ndugu yangu Uhuru Kenyatta hakukuja. Ningependa sana akae pale nieleze yale maneno yote, akisikia apate fursa ya kujibu, lakini ameniwacha peke yangu. Ameniweka shere, lakini ndio ameweka boya hapa. Lakini pamoja na haya, mimi namtakia kila laheri na hata na rafiki yake Bwana Ruto. Nawatakia waheri. Nasema hiyo mchuano itakuwa ya kirafiki, na yule ambaye atashinda ashinde, na siyekubali kushindwa sio mshindani. Shukran, asanteni sana.
All right. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now, that closing statement from candidate Honorable Raila Odinga marks the end of tonight's debate and indeed the 2017 presidential debate series.
Indeed, we thank the candidate, the Honorable Raila Odinga, for the lively engagement, which hopefully the Kenyan voter watching tonight found useful.
Now, on behalf of Debates Media Limited, all broadcasters involved and partners that